Welcome to this episode of the Growthcast. It's me, Jackson Campbell, joined again with Dallas Pruitt for a extended cut episode. Today, we're going to talk about how to receive great advice. One of the things that we've noticed here on the Growthcast is there's tons of advice that Tyler and Dallas give. And we want to give some actionables and some tips on how
we're like the king of advice givers, right? Like this is like advice central.
But the advice and the value that Tyler and Dallas bring to these episodes is so crucial and so valuable that we want to give some actionable items on how to receive this advice that they give. So today we're going to talk about 4 questions you can ask yourself on how to receive to be able to receive better advice. Also, before we dive in, if you haven't given the podcast a rating or review, please do so now. If it's your first time listening to the Growthcast, welcome. We're pumped to have you here. The Growthcast goal and motivation behind the Growthcast is to help us all become our best selves. Right? On those Aloha Friday episodes, we do talk about real estate and we do dive into the real estate topics and things, but the whole point of the Growthcast is for us to grow and become our best self. So welcome to the Growthcast. We hope you come back and listen. There's so much good content that Dallas provides and Tyler provide, and that I think myself provides as well.
Great advice.
We'd love to have you.
Right?
Yes. We'd love to have you come back and listen to more episodes for sure. Anyway, let's dive in here, Dal. 4 questions.
Before you do, hold up.
Yourself.
Before you do, I was going to say, you're talking about becoming your best self, and really strategically, Aloha Fridays is placed there because financially, that's one of those areas where we got to take care of ourselves so that we can become our best self and produce the best work, right? Like money does make the world go round, and money is an amplifier. It's not everything. It's an amplifier though to everything else. And so financially, that's one of those scopes that we have to, that has to be part of our scope of vision in becoming our best self. Really wanted to drive that home. The reason we do that, the reason we hone in and focus heavily in the multifamily space, as a whole, meaning our organization, we're pretty dynamic, is because we know that money is an amplifier, and we know that through that avenue, we can help more people. We can become the best version of ourselves, and without it, we can't become the best version of ourselves. And there's other avenues, but multifamily happens to be that one specific avenue, one niche area we've chosen to become masters at. And Tyler is a master at it, and Ryan is a master at it. And I'm grateful to be a part of that process with them. And, just like physical, spiritual, emotional, like we got to take care of ourselves as a whole. Financially, that's one of those parts, one of those crucial parts. Yep.
Helps. I love how you said it helps enhance your life, not just the work you're doing, but all of your life, dude. It really does. It's a life enhancer for sure.
Absolutely.
Okay, Dow. All right, Dow. Thank you for that, dude. Let's dive in here. 4 questions you can ask yourself. Let's just go through these one at a time.
Cool.
First question. Go ahead, D.
Yeah. So great advice. Jackson said it best. That's 101. That's what we're doing. I'll say Jackson's part of that equation. He modestly was like, Tyler and Dallas, Jackson's full of great advice. Most of it comes from me through him, but no, I'm just kidding. He's full of great advice. Jackson has helped me so much. In fact, we spend an hour-long session every time we record, just kind of processing information. He's giving me advice. He's one of my trustees in terms of somebody that I'm going to listen to, but I have a process of how I go through receiving that advice, whether it's Jackson or Tyler. Tyler's part of that circle, but there's lots of other people and people that you listen to all the time. I've lived in this space for a long time now. Jocko Willing's a name that comes to mind, and his podcast, and, Justin Sua and his podcast, and
Andy Frisella.
I'm working with a client last week, and she's like, oh man, who was it? Dean Graziosi, he said something, and it's just like, you just verbatim rip off these things. And it's like, okay, awesome. We all receive great advice all the time. We're proactively seeking it out. But what is our process for receiving that great advice? If we can have a process for receiving that great advice, that great advice will become actionable and more relevant and amplify our lives at a much higher level, instead of just like consuming great advice all the time. You used the word digest a minute ago. And what's funny is the last time I was in Maui, Tyler and I went on a hike. We talked about consumption versus digestion in terms of advice, in terms of information. There's a complete difference there. We can gorge ourselves with advice all day long. We can consume, but are we truly digesting the most relevant components of that advice and making it actionable so that we can see the difference or the result in our life based off that advice? right? And so there are questions.
It reminds me of that quote in White Men Can't Jump, right?
Yeah.
When they're driving in the car and Wesley Snipes' character, I can't remember their character's name right now, turns to Woody Heller. They're listening to Jimi Hendrix, and he goes, "You can't hear Jimmy, you can just listen to Jimmy." Like he was making that same comparison there, right? Is you can listen, you can hear what everybody has to say, or you can listen to it, right? You can listen to everything that everybody has to say, but are you truly hearing it?
Yeah, are you hearing the message
and putting those things into place? Yeah, exactly.
Are you truly allowing it to amplify your life? Correct. Right.
Yeah.
So exactly. You said 4 questions, and I just wanted to go through these. One of those great ways of how to better receive great advice is to ask yourself the question: did the person giving me the advice try to understand the context? What I mean here is a good advice giver seeks to understand and adheres to the uniqueness of the situation. Now, on a broad scale, that's difficult. We're on a podcast. I cannot dive into the lives of every single solitary individual. But the point here is that there is no one size fits all. All of our journeys are unique. We're all in unique situations personally, with lots of different variables, like so many to count. Like, I don't even know what the number would be. There's that many. So when you receive great advice, pay attention to how the person, if that's a one-on-one situation or in a closed group, pay attention if that person's really dove deep into your uniqueness, meaning your situation, and tried to understand. And the greater they do that, the more emphasis I would put on that advice. Does that make sense? When there's an increase there and you see that and you feel that, you'll see it and you'll feel it, right? At that point, you have to recognize and notice that, oh my gosh, this is a really good piece that I should work to implement ASAP. Or if that context is missing, just take it for what it is. It's good advice. It's great advice, but we need more context. Context helps. The more context we can have, the more actionable things can become, or the more better action we can take, and the more trust we can lay in to that great advice. Does that make sense?
Totally. No, it totally makes a ton of sense. And it's like, almost as you're talking about this, it's like you almost really need to identify who you're going to take advice from, right? You need to know those people that are in your inner circle that know you, know your situation. You really have to identify who are those people that are going to give you that advice, right? One quick actionable that we can pull out of that is, what is that person doing? Are you trying to become like that person, right? Yeah. We talk about becoming a lot on the Growthcast, doing the things that are going to help you become that person you want to become. So that person that you're taking advice from, is that somebody that you would like to become a version of, or sort of similar to? Those are the people that you need to listen to your advice, to take advice from, and really hear them and listen to that advice.
Absolutely.
That's kind of what I took out of that. Is that along the lines of what you're talking about here?
That is a great additional piece there. And you're absolutely right. And it also means that there has to be a relationship factor of some sort, right? Like, as you and I have grown in our relationship, what has been your trust in the type of advice, or all the advice that I give you? Has it been amplified, that trust, or has it been has it decreased?
Absolutely. I would almost ask you the same question, because you came in as a mentor to me. I was very much the mentee, learning from you at the very beginning. So I would ask you that same question, dude. You probably at the beginning weren't taking much advice from me, because I was the mentee. I was in the learning shoes, right? So it's just really important to identify those things. It's not that Dallas doesn't take advice from me now and we don't have those conversations that are very, very important, but you have to really identify, and there's a time for all those.
For sure. But with you, it happened fairly quick. And the reason I would say that, and the reason I actually want to magnify that for all the listeners, is because you're really good at trying to understand the individual. And so the context, right? Who I am, what my work was, what I'm doing, what I'm striving to become, what I'm striving to build. It wasn't like, hey, that's great, but let me tell you about this. It was like, no, tell me more, tell me more, tell me more, tell me more. You were learning. There was this learning component, getting to know, build a relationship. And so, yeah, I would say that if you're in a situation where you have a mentor that's giving you great advice, that maybe you've just started, yes, listen, take action. And as you're doing that, you'll begin to take even better action based off the advice, the more you strive to build a quality relationship and understand one another. And more importantly, if you're the receiver, make sure that person is getting to know, pay attention to that, right? Like, and be vocal about it. Be vocal about like, hey man, like this is my situation. Like there's this level of vulnerability that's involved for sure. Absolutely.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it just comes back to that very first thing, just wrapping up that first question. Did the person give me the advice, try to understand the context? Though I wasn't to the level of Dallas in this situation that we're talking about, I was still listening and really trying to understand what he was trying to do and what he was trying to accomplish so I could give some sort of advice. So just, it's not that you want to only take advice from people that may be above you or elevated, that may be achieving more than you, but really that person that really cares and that really is going to listen to give you that best context. So just to wrap up that first question, that's awesome. So remember that when you're trying to receive advice.
Question,
right,
better question to ask. Yep.
Better question to ask. Okay. Second question. Go ahead.
Yeah. Second better question is did the person provide me with a framework? What I mean here is there's three things to look for as you receive advice. Did they tell me what to do? Did they tell me what to consider, which is a huge one? And did they tell me or point me in the right direction of where to look? Good advice givers, they're going to help you find where to look. They're going to help draw this map. They're going to provide you with a map so that you can actually go out and do it. So a good advice giver is going to tell you what to do, but they're not just going to tell you what to do. They're going to tell you other things that you should be considering as you prepare to go do that. And they're also going to tell you, they're going to load you up with resources. They're going to load you up with way more resources than just telling you what to do. They're going to give you springboards to be able to get there. Does that make sense? And so take books, for example. We're always dropping books on here. It's like, my job is to help you understand how to better process your decisions every single day and become a better decision maker, become a better leader. You need to become a better leader of your own life. You need to become a better decision maker. You need to weed out errors through the way you process opportunities in life. I'm telling you, that's what you need to do. Here, we are constantly talking about all the things that you should be considering as you navigate that constantly. The uncontrollables, the things that you can control, the way you talk to yourself. We're constantly talking about these things. But also, we're going to point you in the right directions of where you can look for more answers and more context, right? Books. We're always dropping books. Mindset by Carol Dweck, Jocko Willink, Extreme Ownership. There's resources. There's other podcasts that we drop here. There's other articles. There's other people. And so this is something that happens often here. Often, let me enunciate that T, often here on the Growthcast. And good advice givers, that's what they do. And so you have to ask yourself that question. It's like, sweet, somebody tell me what to do. They're telling me it's going to provide me with a good life. Like, let me dissect that a little bit further. What else are they helping me to bring into a magnifying glass and consider? And are they mapping it out for me? Are they giving me a roadmap of how I can actually go make that become reality?
Yeah. I think it's also very important. I totally agree. But I think it's at the same time, I think it's very important to understand that is your responsibility to figure out what those next steps are. Don't just sit and wait for advice for somebody to come tell you what to do next steps. You should be searching those things out. You should be seeking for that advice, that next step, that next thing to do. And a lot of times, right, advice, like one of the things you said, advice givers give you help to where to look and what to do. A lot of the times by their example, they're doing that. That's one of the things I wanted to point out too, is if you watch these people that you're trying to become more like, or you're trying to become a better individual, a lot of times by their example, they're showing you exactly what you need to do to elevate your life.
You just added a bonus piece today, which is good advice givers walk the walk. They don't just talk to you about awesome things that they should be doing.
Absolutely. Is there a great example of that? It's one of these things. Ever since moving out here to Maui, it's going to be a year, literally in 2 weeks, that I've lived out here in Maui. And I've been able to be very close with Tyler on a very consistent level. And simply watching Tyler in his day-to-day do the things that he does, he'd go to the gym at 5 a.m., go surf, even all of these things that he does, has
Journal.
like given me a
All
has
of it.
given me a has given me a perfect framework of what I want to do or what I need to do to be able to elevate myself to the level that Tyler's at. So that's just something that I wanted to add in there too. Like, it's not everybody's advice to tell you what, it's not everybody's job to tell you what to do to become better. So a lot of the times you can find those things just by simply watching them and watching their example of what they're doing and trying to mimic it.
But it is your job to find great advice givers and listen to the message and make decisions based off whatever it is you're consuming. And it is your job to stop consuming and start digesting in accordance with what your vision for your life is and who you want to become and what it is you want to do. So absolutely. So valuable, man. That's awesome. Great. It's a great bonus.
All right, moving on here. Next one. Go ahead, D.
Yeah, I put on here that this one is about you. And this is a really tough one. And that is, you ask the question, like, are my feelings blinding me? Am I focused on the person who's giving the advice, or am I focused on the advice? And the truth is, as human beings, we probably tend to overlook bad advice from people we like, and meaning like we like the person and they're telling us something. So we just take it as scripture. We're like, hell yeah.
Right.
That totally, because I like them. And it's like, man, that oftentimes we're receiving bad advice from someone we like and have a good relationship with. Right. And then on the other end, we tend to overlook good advice from people we don't like. Right. You're receiving some great advice, but like the personality, there's dissonance there with like how attracted you are to the way they speak or the way they carry themselves. I've had multiple experiences that I've had an awakening after the time, right? Like time does its magic. And so I have a prime example of this. I had an opportunity to work with a guy from Southern California. I'm just for context, like I'm a redneck from freaking small town Utah. Like I hunt, fish, chewed tobacco when I was playing baseball in college. I no longer chew tobacco. It's disgusting. But like, that's the kind of childhood and upbringing I had. And so I get partnered up living with a guy from Southern California, dude, bro, freaking surfer, very good looking, metro, just like has complete different language than me. All the girls just freaking swarm to him. And he's annoying. I'm like, this guy's annoying and completely different than me, right? Like fear, total fear. I look back, I'm like, you were fearful, because he was a great leader. That was probably why I was fearful too, because I'm a leader. It's like, oh man, well, he's threatening me. Right. And well, I get partnered up with this guy, no other choice. And he starts leading me out. Hey man, we're going to do things this way. This is how we work. This is how we function. This is how this is what we're doing. And through the work, and through gaining a relationship, and through dropping my ego and my pride, I was able to cultivate probably one of the strongest relationships with another human being that I've ever had in my life. And this guy, shout out to my man, Aaron Dory. I freaking love this Chiamo, bro, freaking so much. He's one of my greatest friends of my lifetime. And he gave great advice. And I finally started listening, and he added to the trajectory of my life forever. And I will forever be grateful for this guy. And I'm sure that he had experiences with me. And he has his own perspective on that situation, but that's a prime example of, we cannot allow our feelings to blind us from opportunity for betterment in our lives. And this happens all too often with people. All too often.
It does, dude. It's another example is I felt that way about Andy Frisella for the longest time, dude. Is because like his aggressive nature and the way he attacks problems and the way he attacks it. It just didn't really vibe with me. Like I didn't really like it. I'll just be straight up. But once I actually started listening to the words that he was saying and really started diving into more of his content and trying to figure out who he was as an individual, I really started to digest that information. I will say that's probably not the right way to do it. I should have put my ego aside way before and really started listening to those things that he's sharing. So this is such a great point.
But it takes a couple times of recognizing that, right? Where you can fix it. Like, again, we catch ourselves in error-ridden thinking. We figure out what traps are. We increase our capability to recognize a trap. And the more we get into a situation and then remove ourselves from it, look at it and go, okay, this is actually the right way to navigate it, the better we can do it in the future. And so, yeah, it happens less. Now, I would say that we still have to be careful because, again, we have self-serving bias and all these things, but like it still can happen and will if you're not careful, but you can catch yourself so much faster and you have such a better opportunity to springboard to more betterment and growth in your life because you now know how to catch yourself in that specific trap. That's your quote, bro. That's your quote. Look, man, you can listen to Jimmy, but you can't hear him. You can listen to Andy Frisella, but you can't hear him. You're not hearing the message. You can listen to Dallas Pruitt. Maybe you're that person right now. You can listen to me, but you're not hearing me. And we have to work hard to be able to hear. And when we do that, powerful things happen. And so it's a great reminder. But it's a process too, right? It's a mental process of approaching that situation in the right way. Yeah. Error-ridden thinking. It's fixing the way we think and fixing that root issue. And once you fix that root issue, guess what? Oh my gosh, now everything changes. Everything's impacted because you fix that root issue. So, yeah.
So, man, so valuable. So just to wrap up this third question is put your feelings aside when you're receiving advice. Put your feelings aside, receive, digest, and then you can start to make judgments on that advice. But as you're receiving it, you have to put your feelings aside to be able to digest and like really consume that content or whatever it is that's
compartmentalize it.
Shared. Compartmentalize it. Exactly. Awesome. Such a valuable tactic there. Thank you, Dallas. Okay. On to the last one, the fourth one. Go ahead.
And this one's really important too. Is there anything I can ignore? Look, you're processing a lot of information all the time. And that's kind of part of the issue when you are seeking great advice all the time, right? Like I think of a lot of the people that live in this community and navigate this world that we're all part of, which is you're being bombarded with information all the time. It's all good information, right? Like given proper context, it's great. But you can't process it all. Like you can't do it all. Like not right now. You have to do what's most relevant, what's most meaningful and purposeful now, given your current situation in the context of what's going on. And so you have to acquire and cultivate the skill of ignorance, meaning like you have to really work hard to better recognize what you can ignore and what you should ignore, even though it's good. That's what I mean. Is like there's some good advice, some great advice that's not relevant right now. So you can't give it that much focus and power because there's other things that are predecessor. There's other things that are more pressing, more important. And you have to give, and it's a step-by-step process, right? So you have to give those things more power, which means that you have to completely ignore certain things or shelf it. It may not even be complete ignorance. It's just like, oh man, that's great. You know what? I'm going to pull out of my pocket in like 8 months when I get there. I'm going to pull out of my pocket in 3 years when I get there. Be realistic with yourself. Maybe it's not the time. That's okay. Just shelf it. You can come back to it. Make note of it somewhere where you can come back and reference it. But not all aspects of what you hear from a great advice giver will apply perfectly to you right now in your current situation. So what that means is not every single detail is extremely relevant for you. So you got to get better at knowing what to ignore and recognizing that. Dude,
Okay, I have a question that comes along that comes alongside with that.
Yeah.
With this actual and this question, is there anything I can ignore? How do I want to word this question? How do I make sure that I'm just not reverting back to my personal biases? You know what I mean? I want to ignore that because I think this is better. I don't want to do that because I think this is better when you're reaching out for advice because you aren't doing something the best way. You know what I mean? So that would be my question for you is how do I identify, am I ignoring it because I just don't want to do it and I just think that that's dumb and stupid, or am I ignoring it because it's actually really not going to serve me? How do I identify that?
Yeah, that is such a great question. How do I ignore and not fall into the trap of having that ignorance being self-serving? Right. Well, the question I would say is to dive even further into that and say, well, okay, is it fear? Is it fear or relevance, right? Like, is it fear? Like, is it meaning, is it doubt? Is it me doubting? Like, that's literally a conversation you have to start to have with yourself, is you got to go another layer deep. Okay. One, recognize that the self-serving bias is a real thing, and accept the fact that like anybody can fall into that, including you, and you will if you're not careful. So dive deeper, get outside of that, recognize that this possibly is the trap, and then just go deeper and say, okay, well, like, is it because I'm fearful and I don't believe I can do this? And where is that fear coming from? A gap of knowledge, a gap of, is there a real issue here with self-doubt? Am I right? Like, we have to have that conversation. But, and then again, the other side of the other side of that is just relevance. It's like, or is it truly not relevant right now? And what can I do to attack that fear? Like, what's causing that fear? What can I do to attack that fear? And maybe that's the most relevant thing, is I got to attack that fear and fix that issue right now. It's not that this is bad. It's not that it's not good. It's not even that I'm not capable. I don't believe I'm capable right now. So the biggest issue pertaining to this is self-doubt. Figure out what the root of that fear is, and then attack that, solve that problem. And then you'll find that whatever you're opposing, you probably won't oppose that much once you attack that root issue, which most of the time is fear. Most of the time is fear.
I mean, that answered my question. Perfect. Thank you, Dallas. So in order for me to really know what to ignore when it comes to advice, I really need to ask myself, why am I ignoring it? I need to have that conversation with myself and figure out what that root is, like you're talking about.
Yeah, that root's deeper than that. It's not just, the root
I
is
don't
deep.
want to do it.
Yep.
Yeah. Why don't you want to do it? And ask yourself those better questions.
Exactly.
Right.
Yep.
Right.
There's lots of things I don't want to do that I do, because I know what comes from it. And I'm not scared of getting uncomfortable. I'm not scared of screwing up. I'm not scared of failure. Yeah. And so I do it. So anyways, that was a great question, man.
It kind of comes back in with that first question that you asked, or that you brought up too, is who are you taking that advice from? Is that person somebody you trust? Yeah, you might feel a little bit of doubt. You might feel a little bit of worry about taking action on some of this advice that somebody's given you, but it comes back. Who was that person that gave you that advice? Do you trust them?
Yep.
Give it a shot. Test it out. See if it works for you. Or don't. You know what I mean? Really have that conversation with.
But you'll never know. Yeah, that's great, man. So great. We could talk about this for. This is something I'm extremely passionate about. I would argue, dude, this is a large reason why I've been able to navigate the drastic changes in my professional career and my life as a whole, and the change that I've been able to I want to say be a part of, but like create, right? Like I'm a firm believer, and I don't want to get too deep here, but like the greatest advice giver for me is God. And so for me, it's like, I look for that pattern, right? Like I look for that pattern. And so for me, it's like, I want to changes that I've been able to create was like, what I wanted to recreate or correct there is I haven't created those things. Like God created those things in my life, and I'm extremely grateful for that. But I understand like my part in that equation. And that is that is the agency factor. It's like, I got to take action. I've got to find those people. I've got to listen. I've got to reflect, and I've got to go through a process of how I compartmentalize this, and then not just compartmentalize it mentally, but literally put it into action, digest it, and have an output from it. And like I said, it's huge. This is extremely valuable because this is a huge reason why, one of the highest contributing factors as to why I am where I am today. Absolutely.
Thank you for sharing that, dude. I couldn't agree more. By the way, I couldn't agree more. So thank you, man. That's so powerful and some great advice. And I really challenge all of our listeners, right? We give advice here on the Growthcast. Today, we're talking about how to digest and how to really take that advice. Dallas just gave some fantastic advice. If you didn't listen, if you didn't hear it, definitely rewind about 3-4 minutes and go back and listen to what Dallas just said, because that advice is so crucial. And like Dallas is saying, he is claiming that his success is correlated with that
one of the highest contributing factors. Absolutely.
Yep.
Absolutely. And just laying full trust, dude. You talk about trust. It's like, that's the relationship I trust most. You could go back through this pattern here, and it's like, that is the relationship I trust most. And because of that, and because I know how to process these components, when I meet other people and I see those patterns, I look for those same types of, not red flags, but like shining beacons. It's like, okay, sweet. Tyler's one of those people for me. Tyler's one of those people for me. Jackson's one of those people for me. And it's because I look to those same patterns in those people. And there's other people. Guy by the name of Ron. Ron came to me a few years ago, and he really springboarded me into a new stage of my professional and personal life. But I saw it in Ron. I saw it in Ron, and I see it in other people. I see it in Ryan. I see it in many other people. But when I don't see it, again, I have a process to go through and help identify that, and I know what to ignore, and it's extremely impactful in my life. So valuable. Dallas, thank you so much, man, for putting this together. These 4 questions, again, so valuable when it comes to taking advice and receiving that advice. So thank you. I think this is an episode that I know I for sure benefited from. And if the listeners really listened and didn't just hear this episode, they should have benefited from it as well. So Dallas, thank you so much, man. Is there anything else you want to say in regards to receiving advice as we wrap up here? The only piece I'd say is, zero. I'm just extremely grateful, dude. I think we covered all of our bases here. But again, if you have questions, if you have, questions about advice, you have questions about a different component that we talk about, I think the only thing I'd want to do, Jax, is continue to open up the airways between us and you, and make sure that you reach out to us. Make sure that you reach out. I mean, I posted a couple of weeks ago on my personal, and I just said, hey man, like, I want to understand better from you guys. What are these topics? What are these hurdles? What are these obstacles? What are these issues? Because we want to cultivate high level, very actionable, specific, digestible content around those things. And that would be my one thing to end with is just, please continue to open up the airways. Let us know. Growthcast at multifamilymindset.com is our email, but I also have my personal that you can DM me. Jackson has his personal. He's getting active on there, and you can DM him. Tyler's, It's all, and a lot of that like primary contact information, I think, is located in the description on the podcast here now on all platforms. So just go to the bottom. You can find our handles and get a hold of us. We want to know.
Give us a follow. Yeah, definitely. Dallas, again, thank you so much. If you haven't rated or reviewed the Growthcast, definitely give us a 5-star rating, especially after all the diamonds that Dallas just dropped on this last episode. So definitely give us 5-star review, leave us a rating, share. We love the Growthcast. We love what we do, and we want to reach as many people as possible. So thank you all for listening. We're so appreciative of you. We love you. Please reach out if there's anything we can do for you. Have a great rest of your day. Take care, y'all.